Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. I'm your host, BJ Odom. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving that 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story to share yourself or have comments about the podcast? Love to hear from you. Just send us an email, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. As we welcome you to episode 59. This episode is one that will surely touch your heart. We're sharing the story of a brave little boy, 6-year-old Wilson Perry, and his incredible mom, Mindy. What started out as a simple lung infection turned into a journey no parent ever wants to take. 3 hospitals, over a year in the hospital of uncertainty, and now they're waiting in Cincinnati Children's Hospital praying for a life-saving lung transplant. If you're a parent or love children, you're going to feel this one deep in your soul. It's a story of love, strength, and hope. So grab your tissues, hug your kids a little tighter, and let's meet this amazing family as we check in with Mindy Wilson next. I am so looking forward to getting little Wilson's story out there to the world. But before we do that, we're meeting his mother, Mindy. And if you would, please tell us just a little bit about yourself.
I'm from North Carolina. Wilson, my son, and his dad, we're not married, but we've been together for 9 years, actually, this month. And he's from Wyoming. So, but we live in North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina originally, from the middle part of North Carolina, like Greensboro, Raleigh area. And about 15 years ago, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina. And that's where Wilson was born. So we live a pretty relaxed lifestyle. I'm involved in quite a bit in Asheville. And then I work as an esthetician, so I do skincare and waxing, and I've done that for about 12 years. And so, yeah. And
I've got to ask, before we get started with your son, Wilson, how many men do you ever have come, and do you kind of enjoy pulling the wax off when it comes to a man?
I don't have a lot of men come, but they do occasionally. The place I'm working now, the place I work back in Asheville, we did, if we did men waxing, we mostly got back waxes, and most of them were pretty good. I did have this one guy one time, younger guy, and I thought I was going to have to it was rough. It was rough. We'll just say that. He had a very hard time.
All right. I was going to say, now we got some smiles out, but let's get to the root of the conversation. Now it's really funny. Your name is Mindy Wilson and your son's name is Wilson. But
yes.
let's get to Wilson. And now he is looking for lungs. And when did this journey for you all begin? And maybe start out by asking you too, before we get into this journey, how old is Wilson today?
Wilson today is 6 years old. His journey kind of got started. We're in June right now, so it was towards the end of June. And up until last year right before this time, Wilson was completely normal 5-year-old. He never hardly got sick. He was about to start kindergarten. He went to pre-K. Honestly, he didn't get, compared to his other friends, I felt like he got sick a little less than they did. So this journey kind of started. I picked him up from his summer camp. He was about 2 weeks into that summer camp. And I noticed his breathing was a little bit labored. And I didn't even know at the time that that's what it was, but it almost sounded like an oxygen machine. It was like, t, t, t. And I remember going like, why are you making that funny noise with your mouth? Like, why are you doing that? And later that night, or when we got home and got settled and everything, we realized he had a fever. So the next day was a Saturday, and we took him into urgent care, and we found out that he had strep throat. And we were like, okay, we'll give him an antibiotic. I think he had strep throat before. So we were, a while back, other kids had strep throat. So we were like, okay, it's just strep throat. By that Tuesday, I had taken him back to the doctor because his fever was not going down. We were giving him Tylenol every 4 hours, doing all the stuff you do. And at that point, we kind of thought, okay, the antibiotics should be working by now. We ended up within that time getting the antibiotic changed, and it still wasn't working. And so on Tuesday evening, we said we got to take him into the ER. And once we took him into the ER, they saw that his liver enzymes were high, which is a sign of infection. And so, as every parent does, I think you just kind of roll your eyes and go, oh gosh, we got to stay we have to be admitted. And, at the time I thought, okay, we'll be admitted for a day, maybe 2 days, and then we'll get to go home. They'll figure out what's wrong. And, a year later, here we are. So at that point, he got admitted to the hospital, and he just slowly started to get worse. His oxygen started to deplete. It was going lower. And then, ironically enough, his skin started to peel off. It was almost like coming off in sheets. It was almost like a burn victim is what it kind of looked like. And at that point, because this regional hospital that we were at in Asheville didn't have a burn unit, they were trying to get us to anywhere that had a burn unit. And so we were transferred to UNC, University of Chapel Hill, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which ironically is where a lot of my family is. And so we were taken there. Wilson just progressively got worse. Again, he was diagnosed with Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is a skin disease where it's really a mucosis. It attacks the mucosa cells, and but it really affects the skin. So a lot of times you get like 3rd-degree burns with this kind of thing. And so we thought we were going to be looking at skin grafts and everything else. And this was kind of before we knew anything really had to do with his lungs. And so they were able to heal his skin beautifully. The burn team there did a great job, and his skin did great, but his lungs just progressively got worse. And so he was put on, he was intubated within 24, I think it was about 48 hours, 24 hours after we got there, intubated. He was put on a ventilator. Then they put him on what's called an oscillating ventilator, which they thought, okay, well, if this doesn't work, maybe we'll try the oscillator. So they put him on that, and that kind of vibrates. And then we came in, 48 hours after that, and they said that they were going to have to put him on this ECMO machine. And before this, I had no idea what any of this stuff was. And now I feel like as any medical parent does, you just become like a pro at learning all of these things. So I had no idea what ECMO was. And, that was kind of like the first, I won't say the first, but a big part of going, okay, this is not just we're in and out of the hospital. This is a bigger deal. And so, so he was put on ECMO. So I'm sure most of the listeners may know what that is, may not, but it's, extracorporeal support. So it's essentially taking that blood that he cannot physically oxygenate on his own with his own lungs, and it's taking that blood out and then putting in oxygenated blood back into his body. So it's essentially doing the job that his lungs can't do. And so we continued to be at the hospital, keep an eye on it. Again, I was learning all of these things as we went as to what it was and what was going on. And around the end of the third week, it was pretty obvious that this hospital was kind of at a standstill of not knowing what to do, and his lungs were not improving. And I ended up my dad sent me a YouTube video of this lady, and he at that point he had been diagnosed with ARDS or ARDS, which is basically acute respiratory disorder. So his lungs were, it was like, we don't really know why this is happening, but his lungs cannot support him. And I ended up finding this lady in Florida, actually, this mom, and she had a son who had been on ECMO for, I'm probably getting the numbers wrong, but for a long time. I want to say 6 to 8 weeks that he was on. And it was just a lot of the same things that I was going through. And she had a YouTube video and kind of just showed his journey and how he was at home now and like he was doing well. And I reached out to her. And at that point is kind of a turning point. I think I was definitely at a place where I wasn't sure if Wilson was going to make it. I mean, it was very much like, our hands were tied as far as what we needed to do. And so reaching out to her was like a total turning point. I felt like I had lost all hope, and she kind of talked me through everything, told me what I needed to do, I guess, as or what she had been through, and that kind of led me in the direction of what I needed to do. And at that point, I really started pushing the team to either transfer Wilson or get some kind of extra support from another hospital that could help him. And within 2 days, I think of that, they asked if we wanted to be transferred to Cincinnati Children's, and emphatically it was yes. And at that point, I was aggravating the team so much. My husband makes a joke that that they wanted to get me, they wanted to transfer me out of the hospital before, they wanted to get Wilson out, because I was just like pushing them really hard. And at that point too, he was on ECMO, but he was also not moving. He was physically in the bed. So I think most people know, if you're in the bed 2 or 3 days, you kind of lose a lot of that, so each day is like another day that you're kind of, your body's not supported physically, and you need to move. So, that was the one thing Katie in Florida said. She said, you got to get him up and moving, get some of that mucus off the lungs. So we transferred here. He was air flighted here on August 14th of last year. And that's when kind of the process began he was also very, very, very heavily medicated. When he got to this hospital, he was on, I was told 11 times the starting dose of morphine. So he was on that, plus every other, drug you can think of, or said, fentanyl, oxy, he was on all of them. So and I think for most people that don't know, getting off a lot of those medications is not an easy battle. And so, we started, essentially he was comatose when he came here. So he was we were getting him off the meds and starting to wake him up. And, when I think back to that time that we were in the PICU at this hospital, and we had amazing doctors here, Andrew Louts and Maya Dewan, and they were just like family to us. I mean, and they still are. And they just really took us under their wing and helped, kind of made the journey so much easier. And so they were slowly starting to wake them up. And we came here with the idea, Katie, who I spoke with in Florida, the mom, her son fully recovered. I shouldn't say fully recovered. He did not fully recover. He did not have to have a transplant with getting off ECMO. He has, he still doesn't have full lung function, but he's thriving. And obviously for any medical parent that, you talk to, it's not there's never really an end of the road. And I'm sure you know that with your journey, it's kind of like one thing after the other. But I kind of went into this, when we got here, just really being very fearful of lung transplant, just like, we're not going to go for lung transplant. We're just going to rehab his lungs, rehab. And about a month after we were here, Wilson was starting to wake up. He was starting to move a little more. And the CT scan that they did, most CT scans that were done here were like around every 4 weeks. And they did a CT scan, and there wasn't much improvement. Or I shouldn't say improvement. It didn't really show much difference than what we had at UNC. And so we were like, okay, we're going to keep, trying. And he was doing really good as far as like waking up. And like I said, it was a very trying time during that time. And so his heart ended up starting to suffer. And so they would do weekly echoes, and it showed that he was diagnosed at that point with pulmonary hypertension. So basically, for those that don't know, essentially that is when the right ventricle that pumps blood into your lungs, once the lungs get so fibrotic and hard, it's like, if you imagine the RV is like a water hose and it's just shooting at a concrete wall, essentially that's what the heart was doing against his lungs. And so that heart starts to give out. It can't do what it would do if that wall was a sponge.
Yeah, because it would be adding more pressure. It'd be trying to add more pressure. Yeah. Now, see, I had a similar experience when I went for my heart transplant, and they thought I was going to need both a heart and lungs. And so I'm hearing exactly where you are, but thank goodness, whatever the pressure was or whatever the problem was, it was all in the pressure. And they said, I don't know if a heart will be able to even, handle this pressure. So
right.
I completely, understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. So at that point, it was just kind of like, okay, we still want to rehab these lungs. Like, we don't go, want to go directly to he needs a transplant, but it progressively got worse. And, at that point, ECMO could really, and at this point he was still on ECMO. They had changed the cannulation a little bit, and they had also done, I didn't mention, but they had, when he first got here, they had done a septostomy in his heart. So it's a little hole in his heart that kind of gave him, so the pressure wouldn't be so, I think I could be saying this wrong, but the right ventricle and the left ventricle, there was a hole in between those, and still is. And so that did release some pressure, but as we continued on at the hospital, it got worse and worse. So eventually, the day before Thanksgiving, he was gone. He went into surgery to have a PLAD, which is much like a VAD. Some people go home on VADs for their heart. This one in particular is essentially ECMO, because it is oxygenating his blood, because he can't, without that support, he wouldn't be able to breathe or have oxygenated blood. But the PLAD is a pulmonary lung assist device. And it's this big machine. It's on rollers. It has oxygen tanks hooked to it. It has a little square on it the size of, like, I don't know, like almost a little bit like a small soccer ball. And it's the square, and that blood goes into his left atrium, and then it pulls out from his pulmonary artery, and that little ball, that lung is what they call it, it oxygenates that blood, and then it goes back into the left atrium. And that is what is supporting him right now. So he's on a mechanical device that's completely supporting him. So he was put on that machine the day before Thanksgiving. Still on medication, as far as, like, I mean, he was still weaning down from much of the pain medication and the sedation meds. And I would say, we were talking he needed, sorry, I didn't mention this either, but before he got put on this device, we did one more CT scan. And that CT scan his lungs were just completely fibrotic. And that was the first time really seeing from that CT scan, like his lungs are not healing. And not only that, they are not going to heal. They are scar tissue, essentially. So, we knew we were going to have to go on this PLAD, but we were hoping to recover after that with, which is very uncommon. That usually doesn't happen. I think there's only been one girl in Chicago who had that happen on this particular device. And she was on that device for 528 days and her lungs finally healed. And it was a big thing to like realize that he was going to need a transplant. Cause I think, when I would talk to other parents, who had rehabbed their lungs, or their children's lungs, when they would talk lung transplant, I would be like, no, that's not Wilson. We're going to rehab his lungs. So it was kind of a reality check when they were like, actually, no, this is, and I think the pulmonary hypertension team here, which is amazing, they, they were kind of prepping me for, he's probably going to need a lung transplant for quite a while, before that CT scan showed so much fibrosis. And so it was, I always say, like, the thing I didn't want the most, which was lung transplant, the thing I wanted to stay away from the most when I found out he had to have a lung transplant, I couldn't want anything more, because I knew essentially that would give him, it's not a cure, but, it would give him a chance to be at home with us and essentially, hopefully, have a semi-normal life. And so, like I said, Thanksgiving, he got the machine, that circuit put in. We slowly started to see him just do so much better. I think getting that relief from that pressure off the right ventricle, which this machine does, getting that right ventricle to kind of calm down, we slowly saw with his echoes that, that right ventricle was healing, and it's not completely healed yet. It's still staying steady. It's moderately dilated and diminished still. But it's still doing okay. And then the big question too was also, is he going to need a heart and a lung? And in February, I think it was, they did a heart catheterization and found that his pressures were great, or shouldn't say great, but were lower. And essentially, once he does get that transplanted lung, his heart will be eventually able to heal. So that was like at least a break for us. I think that was like the first time we felt like, okay, we're getting a break, because everything up until then was kind of bad news. But mid-January, he really started to blossom. He was doing much better PT. His legs, I remember he would walk, with a bent, his legs wouldn't even go straight because he had been, in the bed so long. And he just got better and better and better. And he's doing great. And in March, he was listed for transplant. The thing I think we had talked a little bit about was during all this, during the listing, at least, when you're prepping for a transplant, you have to make sure that you're physically ready and that, all your labs look good, and et cetera, because they have found with lung transplant, I'm sure heart transplant too, the healthier you can be going in, the better results you have. And so during all this, they're testing, and I don't know how many hospitals do this, but this hospital tests for a PRA score, and that essentially tells the percentage of matches you may be able to have. And when he first got up on the floor, was 98%, meaning that he would only have a 2% chance of finding a match. and that was a big hurdle in what we have had to, the hoops kind of that we've had to jump through on this. And our lung transplant doctor, the whole pulmonary team's amazing, the lung transplant team. But the lung transplant head, I guess is what they're called. Dr. Don Hayes Jr., he came up with a protocol from UCLA that has not been used in pediatrics as much for getting those antibodies lowered. And essentially what it is, it's a chemo type drug. So it does, drop the immune system and makes him a little more susceptible to infections and illness. But he gets that infusion once a week. And with that, he went from, I should have counted them before I got on here, but it was close to 30 maybe unacceptables all in class 1. And essentially what that means is his antibodies were higher than 5,000 each antibody. So you have different antibodies or MFIs in your body, and each of those were above 5,000. And usually you want below 5,000 in order to find a match. And it's very confusing and very complicated.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hard for me to even understand.
I've been through it a few times, so I hear you. And I still, to this day, it's like me trying to do algebra. I have not
exactly. It is totally that. So it's hard for me to explain to people, but essentially he went from, having almost every single unacceptable antibody to now being, I think he's like 8 or 9 or maybe 10 weeks into this protocol, and he's down to 3 unacceptables.
Okay.
So essentially what that means is when we're looking for a match, if Wilson has A, B, and C that are high, the donor would not be able to have those A, B, and C. But if the donor had D, E, and F, it would be acceptable for Wilson to accept that lung. And I might not be even explaining that correctly, but from what I understand, he's down to about 3 right now, and his PRA score has lowered. And he's had a couple of illnesses that, luckily, knock on wood, he's had rhinovirus, which is essentially a cold, and he's been able to handle that well. He's had that twice, and he just got out of kind of the symptoms of that. And actually this morning he had a fever. So again, it's still things that we have to deal with, but they're doing all the things they're supposed to do as far as taking cultures and labs and starting him on antibiotics and that kind of thing. So
now is Wilson able to communicate with you now then and everything?
Absolutely. It's what's funny is it's so hard because these cannulas that he has in his heart are essentially they're in his stomach area. So it's kind of like right in the middle of his stomach. And so you can't see them, most of the time they're covered. Also, the other thing with ECMO or with, devices that, have your blood outside your body, you're pretty much constantly cold. And he is always cold, so he always has blankets on him. And so you can't see those cannulas. And it is so hard for me to go in there every day and go, why can't you just come home with us? And then go, oh yeah, you've got this big machine connected to you that's keeping you alive. So he's able to communicate. He is going to school. He is playing video games with Child Life. He's doing everything kind of, if you met him, you'd be like, he's a normal 6-year-old. And he is now, which is almost a hard pill to swallow, is that he is doing so well. But yeah, able to communicate, able to move. He does PT. We do plank challenges in the gym with each other, So he walks on the treadmill. He rides the bike in there. He, plays. I got him this. And the other piece of this is, I'm telling his story from my point of view, but really he has just blown us away with how strong he is. I mean, when he got here, he had a trach, and he just got that removed because, really he doesn't have any airway problems. So he's gotten that trach out. And essentially he was just put on that for ventilator support and trying to rehab the lungs. So that has been, made things so much easier just having that trach removed. And then he had an NG tube that was going into his stomach to feed him and give him medication. He has since stopped that. He's got a great appetite. He takes all of his meds by mouth now, in pill form. So he's able to swallow 2 or 3 pills at a time, which is more than I can do. So no, he's just thriving. So he's doing great. And, it's just like, he said, and it's hard too, because you're talking to a 6-year-old about what this process is. And, there's parts where he can understand, and then there's these parts that he doesn't understand. And so, when I was kind of talking about transplant, getting an organ, and he said, when did they come in? When did the lungs come in?
Yeah.
And that's, a hard subject to kind of,
It's like,
but yeah, I mean,
don't we have Amazon? Can't that be here tomorrow?
I know. Exactly. Can we do that? Would be great. Yeah. I would love that. But yeah, some of the processes is, it's hard, and he just knows he's sick. And, at one point, I think it was starting to get wintertime, and we all started wearing masks in the room, before he, whatever. And, he was like, why is everybody wearing masks? And I said, well, honey, we don't want to get you sick.
Yeah, trying to
And he
protect
said,
you.
yeah. And he said, well, I'm already sick. It's just like these little things of like, oh, yeah, but, so I think it's hard. But I think for the most part, he kind of understands more about like, that he got really sick and it's not really normal. And, especially, I mean, I talk to so many families and parents, and I think it's hard because and I was listening to another one of your podcasts the other day, and you were talking to a guy actually from North Carolina who had a heart transplant, and you guys were both talking about how when you grow up struggling with illness or sickness, it's nothing new, to have all the appointments and do all the things.
Yeah, because I'm currently writing a book about my journey, because it's
Sure.
it's a long. Heck, I'm 70 years old, and I hate to start crying on this podcast, but I shouldn't even have been here in my teen years, and I'm 70 years old. And
Exactly.
So it was my normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and we're here at the Ronald McDonald House, and you see that all the time. This is the normal here. You see parents that are struggling. You see kids that are struggling. I mean, absolutely. And you have parents that have been through this their whole lives, or their children's lives. Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest with you. I think, as parents, you are struggling much more. As I kind of remember back to my days, I know my parents had to be strong, even though they were being strong for me. I didn't see it, but like I said, everything was normal to me. So it wasn't like, oh, I can't run with the rest of the kids. Oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. But it was my normal. And so as a kid, I don't think you worried about that, because it's like, well, yeah, this is the way life
what
is.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think for us as parents, it's a little different because, we went from a perfectly healthy, nothing gone wrong, to all of a sudden we've not been able to go back home and live an extended amount of time because we've been in the hospital, so, but 100%, like you said, he is handling this so much better than we are, in so many ways, like he's, and there's so many things and I'm sure they had these, back when you were in the hospital, but child life and psychology and all these things that like play a part in making his stay more comfortable. And that has helped him so much. I mean, it's helped us as well. But I don't think he knows really any different as far as like this is not normal, and he misses his friends, and he does talk about going home, but he's also making the best out of it. But yeah, we're at Ronald McDonald House, which I'll give a plug to them. I didn't even know, again, another thing, I had no clue what it was, Ronald McDonald House in Cincinnati, and completely provide food, lodging, everything here, crafts, yoga. I mean, they are just an amazing support, and I really don't know what we would do without Ronald McDonald House having this. And it's basically a place, for those that don't know, a place where, if you have to go to a hospital or stay in a hospital that's far away from your home, you can stay at Ronald McDonald House. And I didn't even know things like this existed. I didn't even think about parents having to transfer their children to a hospital, or that a regional hospital just can't take care of everything that your, kid needs taken care of, which that's probably a little naive, but that's the thing, is when you're not faced with a lot of these things, I think, and that's why I feel it's so important to get his story out there, is just making people aware, the awareness that really comes with a lot. I mean, I'm sure there's things that I'm still not aware of that, because I haven't been faced with it. So yeah.
Well, one thing I would like to kind of press on, and this may be difficult for you to talk about, but he is still waiting for a lung transplant. And the other part I want to get into this, when people sometimes, and I think it's even kind of harder for children, because I think when you lose someone, as they get older, even in life, like 30s, 20s, and they've grown a little bit, and you kind of like, you're also, older and wiser. So when you think, if they pass for, like in a car accident or something, you don't hesitate, or you hesitate, but you go, okay, yeah, that would be great if he can save lives. Let's, donate those organs. But a 6-year-old, when you go into parents of a 6-year-old, because it goes by size. I mean, if someone dies in their 20s
Absolutely.
or 30s, their lungs are not going to fit in Wilson. So
Right.
This is going to have to be a child. And for that, for that family to make that decision, it may be tougher. So, what I'm hoping for, and I know you're hoping for, and the awareness of people out there that, if that day, and God forbid, because, you're fighting for your son's life, God forbid if that happens, but if he's no longer available to live, and you don't donate those organs, because think of what you can do and the people you can save. I just want to,
absolutely.
I just want to make that so clear to people.
Yes, it is. And again, it's that piece of awareness. I mean, when kind of all this started and I realized, okay, he's going to need a transplant. And yes, it is a tragic event for someone else. And, for another child, I mean, kids are dying every day, but, not as in mass amounts that adults are. So it is more difficult for children to get organs. But absolutely, there would be no hesitation. And sadly, I had to look on my license after, I started kind of getting into this, to say, did I sign that I was going to be an organ donor? And I did, but it's just one of those things that I didn't, it wasn't a personal cause to me. And now it's became this personal kind of like cause, so absolutely there would be no hesitation, but I completely understand parents who are maybe not educated on what a donation can do. And I don't know that there's an easy way. I mean, we have a great organization in Kentucky called Network for Hope. I don't know if it's international or not. And I know they're about bringing awareness to donation or organ donation. And, really that's what it comes down to. I mean, so many issues come down to awareness, but yeah, there would absolutely be no hesitation. I can't speak, if this was some random car accident thing, Wilson passes, I don't know that I would have had the knowledge to know or to check that yes box for him. I don't know, because I don't know the impact that it would have had. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes perfect sense to me because
Yeah.
I had someone on this podcast, a gentleman who needed a liver transplant and got his liver transplant. But
Mhm.
few years before he even had liver problems or even went to a doctor to talk about, you need a transplant. His wife had passed. And he was the
Mm.
person that was in that room where they said, would you like to
Wow.
donate her organs? All of a sudden, his wife is dying. She's leaving this
Mm.
world. The first thing he said, no, because you're grieving. Your loved one is
Right,
dying.
right.
And he said that. And now he's had a liver transplant. He said if he could relive that
Aw,
day
yeah.
any other
Yeah.
way, he would.
Yeah.
And that's what I
Wow.
think every parent needs to think about. Okay, this is a
Yeah.
sad day, and think about it today. And hopefully that never happens. But if it does, know this
Mhm.
conversation we're having today. Think about Wilson, who needs these lungs, and do what's right.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Because it does have an impact. And I think, thinking about that question, it's like, I don't know. I don't think parents or people are being cruel or unkind when they say no. I
Yeah.
just don't think they know the kind of impact that it can have on somebody else's life. And I think if they knew that, then their decision may be different.
That's kind of like with his story, that's what I'm saying. Because I know it
Yeah.
has to be the worst day in any parent's life.
Oh God. Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
these people come in, to the room after you've learned that nothing you can do, and they ask you that question, and
Mhm.
your brain's
Mhm.
going in a trillion million ways anyway.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's why I said that's why I do this podcast. Awareness,
Sure.
awareness.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. No, it's great. You do.
and what's the latest on Wilson? How is he? Let's get to
He's
today.
Yeah, today his antibodies have stayed down. Like I said, he had a little cold last week, and so they had stopped the like I said, the infusion for that daratumumab, which is this medication that will bring his antibodies down. They had stopped that last week, but ironically enough, his antibodies still continued to come down and are lower than they ever have been. So that's good. Like I said, he had a fever this morning, so that's got me a little on edge as to why he's got a fever. But his labs look good. His white blood cell count looked good. So I'm just crossing my fingers that it's not an infection, because that's the other thing with this particular machine, because that blood is outside of the body in these plastic cannulas. It's much harder to treat things. So, if an infection gets in there, it's a little more crucial than if the infection's just in the body. I mean, both are a big thing, but that blood is moving in and out and can get caught in the plastic a little bit, and the infection can as well. So it's just harder to treat. So he's doing great. He's playing pranks on people. He loves, he got some of those jelly beans that, taste, like one's stinky socks and another one's like tutti frutti, and you don't know which is which. And, so he loves to play, jokes on the nurses and on the people in the team. So he's funny. He's a character. He's really hilarious. He loves scaring people. He loves scary movies. He loves, he's just great. I mean, he does great playing games. He'll stand up and play with his occupational therapist. And actually today, it's quite a big deal, but it's 89 here, which I'm sure is like winter to you, but it's 89 here in Cincinnati, and we're going to go get outside. And, it takes 2 people on that machine to go outside. It takes occupational therapist, a nurse. I don't think we have to have respiratory anymore because he doesn't have the trach, but, and then it takes a doctor to come out there outside with him, just in case anything goes wrong with the machine, because that, the machine is also, again, and we forget sometimes, it's a complete mechanical life supporting machine that is is l- basically living, part of his essentially what he needs to stay alive. And so we have to have, teams with us at all the time. There's somebody in the room with Wilson 24/7 sitting with that machine in case something goes wrong, and they can kind of fix it and monitor it. And but he's great right now. He's listed along with, I constantly am one of those moms who looks at the OPTN site to see how many people are listed and transplanted. And there are 9 other children in his age group, 6 to 10 years old, listed for lung transplant right now.
Are they
Which
also
doesn't seem like a big number, but it is, I think, as far as lung transplant. I mean, when I first started, like last year at this time, I was looking on that, and it was only 5 kids, so we're up to 9, which kind of lets me know that. And there's been only 1 child in his age group transplanted this year.
So it is a sometimes a long and hard journey then, for sure.
It is, yeah. So, yeah, and he's at least at this hospital, in his age group. I'll keep saying in his age group because I don't know. A lot of the older age groups are a little different, but in his age group, as far as I know, he's the only one in the hospital. And I don't know as far as other hospitals, but he's the only one that's on, extracorporeal support.
Well,
in this hospital.
Now, what I can tell you too, I know you looked at the list of people, that in that age group and everything else, but there are different variants too, as you know. Of course, the antibodies is a various blood type, things like that. But also now, I know with me, when I got my heart transplant, I was very, very ill, and they had me in the hospital, and I was on, some machinery just like Wilson. And that does, I mean, it's a bad thing and a good thing. Here you're in the hospital
Right.
and you've been there for a long time. But, compared to maybe a child, and I hate to say this, but a child that's at home and maybe waiting
On oxygen.
and waiting for
Yeah.
a lung transplant, you would, if that was the antibodies and everything were in line, it's kind of like, having the fast pass at Disney.
Exactly. And yes, you are absolutely right. And again, we have, I think, out of those 9 kids listed in his age group, I think 5 of them are at this hospital, and he's the highest. The LAS where his is the highest. So essentially, yes, that does mean that. But also other factors, and assuming that his antibodies stay low, and he's an O positive or negative, I can't remember. He's O blood type, so that's a little more rare. So, assuming all that stuff lines up, yes, and size. I think size is kind of the biggest factor, and blood type. But as long as all those things line up, essentially, yes, that should mean that he would get kind of first dibs. Assuming, like you said, if I don't know the other kids at the hospitals, but at the other hospitals that are listed, but essentially he should. So yes, it is. It's like having a fast pass in hell.
Yep.
It's not a fun fast pass, but
it's not like at
one
Disney
that's
World, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not Disney World, but it is. It does essentially mean that he would hopefully get those before another kid. And really, we just want him home. Even if it's at Ronald McDonald, we are so just, I'm sure you can imagine, just tired of going to the hospital every day. And I think everybody's, story is traumatic, but, all of your pain is like relative. So it's like, seeing Wilson and having to go to the hospital every day and not being able to bring him home and, cuddle him in the bed and, do all these things that, we can do a lot of that at the hospital, but it's just something about being home, being home with your family. So, and we just want him home, even if it's for, God forbid, if it didn't work out and that was the end of his life, just having him home at that point would be great. So
well, I'm going to wish you nothing but the best of luck for sure on this whole ordeal, and hope it gets over soon. But
yes, we do too.
What you've told me today that encourages me so much, because it's kind of my belief at least, through all this medical stuff. I think that positive attitude, Wilson being a child as a child, and I think all that, there's no good in it, but if there is any good in it, that's the goodness in it, that is all happening as we speak. So that I am so glad to hear. And I think that was part of my journey and some of the success of my journey, that positive attitude that, hey, we're going to live on. And so I think that is very important, and I'm so glad that he's doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. The normalcy is definitely, that's one thing they kind of honed in on when we knew this was going to be a long journey. Can we get him to a place where he has the best quality of life? And I think he does.
Now,
in the circumstances.
Now, before we let you go, maybe something I missed, something you definitely want to get out there. Let's get that done, because I may not have asked all the right questions. This is your time to shine.
Yeah.
Tell us what you want.
I think just honing in on that part about organ transplant donation is huge. And I get it. If it hasn't, affected you personally, it's a little harder to justify those things. But any way you can, try to have more awareness around that and sign up to be an organ donor, because you can really help other families.
Well, Mindy, our prayers are going to be with you and Wilson. I think it's kind of funny. Your name is Mindy Wilson and your son's name is Wilson.
Yeah. We didn't have any other name for him. We said we want him to be Wilson, so he's Wilson Perry.
All right. So, well, like I said, we wish him the best of luck. And this episode has really touched me, I think, being a child in need. And so thank you.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mindy Wilson. I really do appreciate you for sharing Wilson's story. And of course, we all hope that those lungs come in very, very soon for this young man. Be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. And if you have a transplant story, please email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and please like and share this podcast with family and friends. As always, we really would appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Another podcast you might enjoy, myself and my old radio partner, Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast. All on the Podcast Playground Network, as we'd like to thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you for being a part of our journey and reminding us all, each and every one, to treasure and to cherish the extraordinary gift of life.
He was running on empty, heart fading fast. Doctor said, man, you ain't gonna last. But a stranger's kindness, a gift so true, turned the night sky into something new. He got a second chance, he got a brand new spark. Like a freight train rolling back from the dark. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. "15 years later, the road got rough. The fight ain't over when the climb is tough. Needed a kidney, the race was on. Another hero stepped up, kept him strong. Every breath he takes is a tale of hope. One life saved, another can cope. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. Doctor's hands, a donor's grace, running on down to a brand new place. Second chances don't come twice, but when they do, man, they feel so nice. let the people know. One yesterday lets a miracle grow. You don't need wings just to save a man, just a little love, a helping hand. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. BJ still rockin', still standing tall, thanks to the ones who gave it all. Gift of life, hear the sound. Pass it on, pass it down. The Gift of Life podcast, hosted by BJ Odom. Listen now. Listen now.